the door they tried to close. The crowd shimmered in the early June sun, proud parents, bright banners, and a sea of caps and gowns. The high school football field of Haverly Ridge High was buzzing with the kind of joy only years of effort can earn. But for Marcus Cole, the day carried a weight that words couldn't capture. He sat in his pressed dress blues, medals glinting faintly under the sun. His son, Jaden Cole, was walking that stage today. First in the family to graduate with honors. Marcus had fought in wars on 3 continents, led Marines into fire, and carried brothers home under flags. Yet here, sitting among strangers in his own hometown, he felt an old familiar tension crawl up his spine. The looks, the whispers, the doubt. A young usher in a green polo was scanning tickets down the aisle. Marcus held his polite smile steady. "Sir, can I see your seating pass again?" Marcus handed it over. "Section C, row 5, my son's graduating today." The usher frowned, eyes flicking to the uniform. "This section's for family only." Marcus tilted his head. "He's my son." The boy hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. Another guard, an older man with a radio clipped to his belt, started walking toward them. "Problem here?" The young usher lowered his voice. "He says he's family." The older guard eyed Marcus up and down, his expression unreadable but heavy with judgment. "Sir, this section's reserved." "You'll have to move." "Reserved for who?" "Immediate family." Marcus let out a slow breath. "I am immediate family." A murmur rippled through nearby parents, some pretending not to listen, others not bothering to hide it. The older guard stiffened as if Marcus's calm tone was a challenge. "Sir, I need you to stand up." Marcus stayed seated. "You don't need to make a scene, son." I said stand up. That's when Jaden's name echoed through the speakers. "Valedictorian Jaden Cole." Cheers erupted, but Marcus didn't hear them. He was staring at the guard's hand now resting on his shoulder. The guard leaned close. "You can watch from the general section," he muttered. Marcus stood finally, every movement deliberate. His voice stayed even, but carried an authority that had commanded platoons. "Son, I've been shot at in 5 countries for people I didn't even know. I won't walk away from watching my boy cross that stage." The guard stiffened. "Then we'll have to escort you." And just like that, 2 guards flanked him. The murmuring grew louder. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "What's he doing here anyway?" Marcus turned his gaze toward the stage. Jaden was looking out over the crowd, searching, smiling at first, then hesitating when he didn't find his father where he'd been sitting. A quiet pride turned to confusion on the boy's face. One of the guards tugged Marcus's sleeve. "Sir, now!" Marcus didn't resist. He walked down the aisle, every step echoing louder than the applause. The uniform that once drew salutes now drew stares. At the gate, the older guard gestured outside. "You can wait beyond the fence." Marcus stood at the edge of the field behind the chain-link barrier, his medals gleaming in the sunlight like accusations. He looked up at the stage, at his son trying to keep his composure as he delivered the speech they'd practiced together. He smiled faintly. "Stand tall, son," he whispered. "They can't take that from you." But inside something cracked. He'd fought to be treated as an equal in foreign lands. Now back home, he was being escorted out of his own son's graduation for looking out of place. Later, when the ceremony ended, Jaden found him standing by the flagpole, eyes distant. "Dad, what happened?" Marcus turned, his composure holding by a thread. "Nothing you need to worry about, champ." "I saw you. You were incredible." Jaden frowned. "They said you had to leave." "I saw the guards. It's fine." "It's not fine." Jaden's voice cracked with something between anger and disbelief. "You fought for this country. They—" He couldn't finish. Marcus laid a hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. The world doesn't always give you respect. You earn it every day, even when it's denied to you. But Marcus smiled sadly. "One day you'll understand the power of walking away with your head up." But Jaden wasn't nodding. His jaw set in quiet defiance. That night the story didn't end. Someone had filmed the whole thing. The guards escorting a black Marine from the family section while his son gave his valedictory speech. It went viral within hours. The internet exploded. Some comments defended him. Many didn't. Fake uniform. Probably crashed the event. Entitled. Playing the race card again. The noise was deafening. And Marcus, The man who had faced down insurgents and firestorms now faced a digital mob that questioned his very worth. By morning, a reporter was at the door. By noon, veterans groups had reached out. By nightfall, the story had reached the Navy SEAL community, and 6 of them, all brothers Marcus had trained with years ago, called him the same day. "Marcus," said one deep, gravelly voice on the line, "we saw what they did. You tell us where this happened." Marcus hesitated. "It's done, Jacob, let it go." "No," came the reply. "You stood for us more times than I can count. Now we stand for you." Marcus sighed. "This isn't war." There was silence. Then Jacob said quietly, "Maybe not. But sometimes, brother, silence is the loudest battlefield." Marcus hung up, staring at the folded flag above his mantle. He didn't know it yet, but that flag would soon fly over a reckoning no one in that small town was ready for. Because when 6 SEALs walk into a town to stand beside a Marine, people listen, the quiet, before the roar. 3 days had passed since the video went viral. The town of Haverly Ridge had never seen this kind of attention before. Reporters gathered by the school gates like vultures circling roadkill, microphones flashing, voices overlapping. The principal had gone silent. The district released a bland statement about a misunderstanding, and the 2 security guards, those men who had escorted Marcus Cole out, were on leave pending review. To the public, it was a story of outrage. To Marcus, it was just another wound reopened. He spent those days mostly in silence. His small house outside of town felt even smaller now. The walls too close, the TV too loud, the medals on his shelf feeling like relics of a world that no longer respected what they stood for. Everywhere he looked online, his name was being debated by strangers. The man's a hero. He shouldn't have worn the uniform to a school event. He was looking for attention. The truth didn't matter anymore. Only the noise did. Jaden watched his father from the kitchen doorway one morning. Marcus was sitting at the table, unmoving, staring at the folded flag beside his coffee. "Dad," Jaden said softly, "they're still talking about it. The school's getting threats." Marcus didn't look up. "That's not what I wanted." "I know, but people are angry. They should be." He looked at his son, that same fire in the boy's eyes he once had at 19. "Anger doesn't fix anything. It burns out before it builds anything better." Jaden crossed his arms. "So what do we do? Just let them walk all over us?" Marcus took a long sip of coffee. Sometimes the hardest fight is knowing when to stand down. Jaden slammed his hand against the counter. "That's not fair." Marcus's voice stayed even. "Fair's a word soldiers stop believing in real fast." Jaden turned away, fists clenched. "Maybe I'm not a soldier." Marcus's gaze softened. "No, you're my son. And that means someday you'll have to decide what kind of man you want to be. One who reacts, or one who rises." He didn't see the tears welling in Jaden's eyes as the boy walked out the door. That afternoon, Marcus's phone rang. He ignored it the first 2 times, but when it rang again, he recognized the name flashing on the screen. Little Jacob Hawk Ramsey. He sighed, picked it up. "Hawk, I told you—" "Save it," Hawk interrupted, his voice gruff and urgent. "We're coming up." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean, coming up?" "Couple of us are on leave. We're driving in tonight." "Don't do this, Hawk. It's done." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, heart sinking. He knew that tone. It was the same one they used before missions. Calm, certain, unmovable. By sunset, the sound of engines echoed up the dirt road to Marcus's house. 6 trucks pulled up, headlights cutting through the dusk. Out stepped 6 men, scarred, broad-shouldered, each carrying themselves with that unmistakable posture of discipline and danger. Hawk led them, tall, pale tattooed arms under a rolled-up shirt. Next was Ruiz, a stocky Puerto Rican with a jaw like granite. Then Singh, lean and quiet, eyes sharp. Behind them, Booker, Watts, and Reyes, all men who had served beside Marcus in Kandahar. Marcus met them at the porch, jaw tight. "You shouldn't be here," Hawk smirked. "You didn't think we'd let this go, did you?" "This isn't your fight." "Wrong," Ruiz said, stepping forward. "Anytime a man in uniform is disrespected like that, it's every one of our fights." Marcus looked from one face to another, old ghosts of a past he'd tried to put behind him. "This isn't a battlefield. It's a small-town mess that'll blow over." Hawk's smile faded. No, brother. This is the same fight, just a different field. Marcus turned toward the door. You can't fix ignorance with force. Behind him, Hawk's voice was calm, resolute. We can stand in front of it. The next morning, the sun broke over the school like a warning. Reporters had gathered again, waiting for another headline. The principal, Ms. Harland, stood at the doors, her expression tight as a noose. And then, 6 black trucks rolled up to the curb, every engine cut in unison. Out stepped the SEALs. They weren't in uniform, but something about the way they moved, disciplined, unified, commanding, made people instinctively step aside. Marcus followed behind. Reluctantly, hands in his pockets, the whispers started immediately. Those are the guys from the video. They're military. Are they protesting? Ms. Harland froze at the top of the steps. Mr. Cole, what is this? Marcus said quietly. A conversation. Hawk stepped forward, eyes locked on her. We're here to talk. The guards from the incident, Rick and Daniels Hume, stood nearby, pale and uncomfortable. Rick swallowed. This ain't necessary. Neither was dragging a Marine off school property in front of his son. Ruiz cut in. The crowd murmured louder now, cameras flashing. Ms. Harland raised a hand. Gentlemen, please. The situation's under review. Hawk's tone stayed respectful but firm. A review without accountability is just a delay. We came here to ask for one thing, an apology. Public, real, and honest. The guards exchanged glances. Rick shook his head. We were following protocol. Singh's voice was quiet but sharp. You don't put your hands on a veteran for protocol. Daniels muttered. We didn't know who he was. That's the problem, Hawk snapped. You didn't care. The air grew electric. Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Enough. Everyone fell silent. He looked at the guards, then at the principal. They don't owe me an apology. They owe my son one. He's the one who had to give a speech while watching his father get escorted out. Jaden, who had been standing by the cars, stepped forward then. His voice trembled, but his words didn't. All I wanted that day was for my dad to see me graduate. But he taught me something bigger. Sometimes the world doesn't clap for you. Sometimes it pushes you down just to see if you'll stand back up. The crowd fell quiet. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. Jaden turned toward the guards. You didn't just disrespect a Marine. You disrespected every kid who dreams about making their parents proud. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Harland's lips parted, unsure of what to say. Marcus watched his son, pride and pain colliding in his chest. Then Hawk took one step forward. You heard the boy. What happens now? Rick's face reddened. You can't intimidate us. Hawk smiled thinly. Intimidation? No, this... He gestured to Marcus and Jaden. This is accountability. But before another word could be said, the sound of sirens pierced the air. 3 police cars pulled up fast. Lights flashing, tires screeching against the curb. An officer stepped out, hand hovering near his holster. What's going on here? Ms. Harland turned, relieved. Thank God. Officer, these men... Hawk raised his hands calmly. We're not here to cause trouble, but the officer's eyes were already cold, suspicious. Step back. All of you. Marcus felt the shift immediately, that old suffocating feeling of being profiled before being heard. Jaden looked from the officer to his father. Dad? Marcus's voice was low, steady. Stay behind me, Ruiz muttered. Here we go again. The officer gestured sharply. Hands where I can see them. Hawk lifted his hands higher. You're making a mistake. Sir, I said, and then it happened. One of the reporters tripped backward, dropping a camera that clattered loudly to the pavement. The officer's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Jaden shouted, Wait! Marcus stepped forward, and the scene erupted into chaos. Shouts. Movement. A command barked. Marcus felt his body tense, instincts firing. Years of training returning in a heartbeat. Hawk reached out to steady the officer's arm before the situation exploded further. Nobody's reaching for anything, he said firmly. Nobody's getting hurt. But the tension had already taken over the air, thick and brittle like glass. One wrong word, one wrong breath, and it would all shatter. And at that exact moment, the door to the school opened again. A voice rang out across the chaos. Stop! Every head turned. Standing there, framed by the doorway, was an old man in a wheelchair, dressed in faded navy blues. His metals gleamed like quiet thunder. Marcus froze. Recognition hit him like a wave. "Commander?" he whispered. The old man's eyes locked onto his. "If you're going to talk about honor," he said slowly, his voice gravel-edged but commanding, "then it's time this town remembered what it looks like." The crowd fell silent. Even the officers lowered their hands. And in that suspended heartbeat, the tension held him ready to break one way or another. When the SEALs stood for a long moment, no one moved. The air over Haverly Ridge High was electric, heavy with tension, confusion, and disbelief. The reporters had stopped filming. The police froze mid-step, and every parent, teacher, and bystander stood in stunned silence. The old man in the wheelchair, Commander William Iron Bill Lawson, sat framed in the doorway, sunlight catching on the rows of ribbons across his chest. His voice carried the kind of gravity that could silence an entire platoon. "Stand down," he said to the officers. Not shouted. Not pleaded, commanded, and they obeyed. Marcus took a slow step forward, his heart hammering in his chest. "Commander Lawson, I thought you were—" The old man chuckled softly. "Dead? I get that a lot." He nodded toward Marcus. "You trained under me in Quantico, didn't you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Sir, yes, sir." "Then you remember what I told every Marine before graduation?" Marcus's voice was hoarse. "That the uniform doesn't make the man, the man makes the uniform." Lawson's eyes gleamed. And yet here we are, watching men forget that truth. He turned his gaze to the guards who had escorted Marcus out days before. "You two, what exactly did you think you were protecting this school from? A father watching his boy become a man?" Rick swallowed, shame creeping across his face. "We didn't mean disrespect. We were told to enforce seating policy." Lawson's tone sharpened like steel on stone. "You can enforce policy without erasing dignity." No one dared to speak. Lawson looked at Marcus again, his voice softening. "You've carried this country on your back, son. Don't you bow to ignorance now. Stand tall. Let them see the cost of their comfort." Marcus's eyes burned. "Yes, sir." Then Lawson's gaze swept across the crowd. "And the rest of you, listen close, because I won't say it twice." He raised a trembling hand and pointed toward Marcus. "This man bled for a flag you hang on your walls. He fought for strangers you'll never meet. And when he came home, all he asked for was the chance to watch his boy cross a stage. But instead of gratitude, you gave him suspicion. You saw his color before you saw his courage." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, eyes lowering. Lawson's voice rose, gravel and thunder. "That's not the America I fought for. That's not the brotherhood I trained men to die beside. If you want to talk about pride, about patriotism, it starts with respect." Hawk stepped forward, shoulders squared, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "We didn't come here for revenge. We came here because silence is how rot spreads. You can't heal a wound you refuse to see," Ruiz added quietly. "A man's uniform doesn't fade when he takes it off. It stays stitched into his soul." Even the officers stood motionless, their earlier suspicion replaced by quiet shame. Jaden stepped closer to his father, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Dad, he's right. You shouldn't have to keep walking away." Marcus looked down at his son, that spark in his eyes so fierce, so alive, and felt something shift deep within. The anger, the humiliation, the years of holding it all inside. It broke open not as rage, but as resolve. He took a deep breath and turned to the crowd. "I spent half my life fighting enemies overseas, the other half trying to prove I belong in the country I fought for. Every time I think we've come farther, I find another wall waiting. But walls don't scare me anymore, because I've learned how to climb." His voice grew steadier. "The truth is, respect isn't owed by a title, a uniform, or a medal. It's earned by how you treat people, especially when you think no one's watching. Those guards made a mistake, but I won't let their mistake turn into my bitterness. That's not what I taught my son." Jaden's eyes filled with tears. "Dad," Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Son, don't let anyone's ignorance decide your worth. They can take your seat, your moment, but never your dignity. You hear me?" Jaden nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. Then Marcus faced the guards. "You two have a choice. You can hide behind policy, or stand behind principle." Rick's jaw tightened. He looked at his partner, then back at Marcus. For a second, his lips parted, and something in his expression shifted. The defensive pride fell away, replaced by remorse. He stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "To you, to your son. I saw the uniform and made assumptions I had no right to make." "That's on me," the other guard nodded. "We were wrong." A ripple moved through the crowd, a quiet exhale, a collective release. Lawson smiled faintly. There it is, accountability. Harder than war sometimes. Hawk looked at Marcus. "You good, brother?" Marcus's voice was steady. "Yeah, I'm good." Then from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a woman's voice called out, "He deserves to walk that field." Heads turned. It was a teacher, Mrs. Holt, Jaden's mentor. She wiped her eyes and stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, that's your seat, right there in the front row." "You earned it." Applause began, hesitant at first, then growing. Parents, teachers, even the officers clapped. And for the first time in days, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Not pity, not anger, belonging. Lawson turned to Hawk. "You boys done making statements?" Hawk grinned. "Depends. You got room for one more speech?" Lawson chuckled. "Always." That evening, the town of Haverly Ridge held an impromptu community gathering on the same football field where everything had begun. The sunset painted the bleachers gold, the air warm with quiet reconciliation. Marcus stood with his son at the center of the field, surrounded by his SEAL brothers and Commander Lawson. The mayor handed Marcus the microphone. "Mr. Cole, we'd like you to say a few words." Marcus took it, breathing in the familiar scent of grass and summer air. He looked at the faces before him, the same ones that had once turned away, now watching with quiet respect. "I didn't ask for any of this," he began. "I came here for one reason, to see my boy take the next step. But life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect them." He glanced at the SEALs behind him. "These men came here because they understand something too many forget. Brotherhood isn't about blood. It's about standing beside someone when the world tries to stand on top of them." He turned to Jaden. "Son, I want you to remember this moment. Not because it hurt, but because it healed. You saw people change today, and not because they had to, but because they chose to." He looked back at the crowd. "We talk a lot about freedom in this country. But freedom isn't just a flag or a song. It's the courage to see another person's pain and not look away. If we can do that, if we can really see each other, then there's hope." A hush fell over the field. Marcus raised his head high, voice ringing with quiet power. "My father once told me, the measure of a man isn't how he stands when he's honored. It's how he stands when he's humiliated. So I'm standing here not as a victim, but as proof that dignity can't be escorted out." The applause that followed was thunderous. Even the guards clapped, humbled, changed. Jaden stepped forward, wrapped his arms around his father and whispered, "You didn't just stand for yourself, Dad. You stood for all of us." Marcus smiled, holding him tight. "That's the job, son. Always has been." Later that night, the SEALs gathered with Marcus on his porch, the sound of crickets filling the air. Hawk leaned back in his chair. "You handled that like a true leader," Marcus chuckled. "I had good teachers." Lawson nodded approvingly. "You reminded them what honor looks like. That's something the world needs to see more of." Ruiz raised a bottle of root beer. "To standing tall," Singh added softly. To silence broken, they clinked bottles, laughter echoing into the warm night. Jaden sat on the steps, watching the men who had served with his father, men who had faced death together, now united for something even greater, dignity. He finally spoke. "You know, I used to think strength was about fighting, but now I think it's about forgiving." Marcus smiled. "Took me 20 years to learn that. You're ahead of me." Jaden looked up at the stars. "I want to join the Marines one day." "Like you." Marcus froze, then smiled, proud and terrified all at once. "You sure about that?" Jaden nodded. "You always said the world needs people who stand up when others won't. I want to be one of them." Hawk grinned. "Looks like the legacy continues," Lawson chuckled. "God help the next generation." They all laughed. Deep, genuine, healing laughter that filled the night like music. Days later, a letter arrived in Marcus's mailbox. It was from the Department of Defense. Inside was a citation, not for valor in combat, but for outstanding service in exemplifying the principles of honor and leadership in civilian life. At the bottom, A handwritten note read, "For showing us that courage isn't just found on the battlefield." W.L. Marcus folded the letter carefully, placed it beside the flag on his mantle, and whispered, "Thank you, Commander." As he stood there, Jaden came up behind him. "Dad? Yeah? They're talking about you on the news again." Marcus smiled faintly. "Let them. This time maybe they'll get it right." He looked out the window. The town quiet. The sun setting behind the school where everything had changed. For the first time in a long time, he felt peace, not because the world was fair, but because he had refused to let it make him bitter. He turned to his son. "Come on, let's go throw a ball." Jaden grinned. "You sure you can still keep up?" Marcus laughed, grabbing his old Marine cap from the table. "Son, I've faced worse." They walked out together into the golden evening, laughter trailing behind them, father and son, scars and strength, dignity and hope. And somewhere, watching from his porch across town, Commander Lawson smiled to himself. He whispered into the wind, "That's how you win a war without firing a shot."